Oh, looks like Jason's joined us. Let me just check. Hello, Jason.
Yeah, hello there. Do you hear me clearly or am I echoing from another area?
No, you hear. Hold on, let me just check my stream. Actually, you sound fine to me. Let me double check that. Oh, we got a few viewers here. Give them a minute to get in here. Oh, I think they've been waiting. How are you
Oh,
doing?
yeah.
You said you just got the
Oh,
vaccine.
I didn't get the vaccine, my partner did, but that's all part of the fun. I got my second shot on Saturday, so I'm actually already turning into the Hulk. I'm doing great.
You're doing great. That's good to hear, at least. Um, I think I have confirmation that stream hears you. Just double check. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Am I loud enough? Do I need to turn it up?
Oh no, you're good. I got it all.
Okay.
All right, let's get into
Fantastic.
it then.
All right, let's go.
So it's nice to meet you, Jason. I've been following your work for a while. I watch a lot of your talks. I have a great empathy for what you're doing with archive.org, but maybe just for viewers who aren't familiar, you could give a quick intro to yourself since I know you're so good at that.
I'll take that in a positive way. My name is Jason Scott. I am the free range archivist at the Internet Archive. I'm also a co founder of something called Archive Team. And in some way or another, I have been some sort of archivist since very, very early in my life. Before any of this, I ran a site in the 90s and forward called textfiles.com, which collected bulletin board system history because I felt it needed to be saved even at the time. And then I went from that to kind of taking an interest in general about computer and technical history, especially from a human perspective, the stories. I felt like we would do pretty well with having ROMs, zip files, and APIs, but we were not going to be as good at getting the story of the feelings and the people behind it. So I started concentrating on that as well. Turned out we're not as good with the APIs and zips and ROMs either, but we do pretty well, and I try to help. So I've been doing something on and off involving what people think of as archiving all of my life. I am also ridiculously flamboyant, and I come from a performing arts background, so I'm very much comfortable in public and on stage. So I endeavor to be a glib, easy to handle voice for a discipline and an outlook that I think needs a lot of attention and empathy itself.
Cool. I think that's a really good intro to it. I guess real quick, just because we were talking about COVID, how have you seen your profession changing with the current, I don't know, the pandemic and the restrictions? Are you still doing exactly what you were a few years ago, or has that changed your mission in any way?
So, for me personally, I was doing a lot more presentations by traveling, being brought in. I'm very good at jazzing up an otherwise dull or middling conference by being an opening speaker or a closing keynote. But that is one small part of what I do. For the archive, probably in the most effective change that we saw was that the Internet Archive became remote first over this time. Almost nobody works on site anymore. So in that way, people are doing Zoom conferences and Slack and communicating other ways, and we're not having in-person meetings. Now, I was always a remote worker. I don't live in California, but this means everybody is. So that was a pretty big change. The other thing was that a lot of institutions are, this was a very big squeeze for them. So there have been groups that have been closing, there have been archives that have been shedding, and we have been taking them in. It would be pretty big news for the archive to get a library's contents in previous years. Like we would make a huge deal about that. Now it's happening quite a bit. Every few months, a library is just closing up and giving us pallets of their material.
Interesting. And
So,
that's fueled by the pandemic directly, I assume. Just costs are going up. People can't run these institutions anymore.
Right. I think part of it is that a lot of institutions depended pretty heavily on cash flow, and any amount of knock to that cash flow was killing them. Now, we can get into the fact that there's probably a non zero amount that used COVID and the pandemic as an excuse to take middling or just barely breaking even properties and declare them dead under the cover of, look, it was the pandemic. We didn't have a choice. But there are definitely a lot of places, especially obviously in the entertainment and restaurant sector, that require, um, you know, constant cash flow to stay in business. And when that was gone, they went away. We like to think of libraries and archives as being fundamentally permanent, but it's pretty obvious that they are subject to many of the same forces. So the Internet Archive has been taking in truckloads of printed materials, books, um, all of the related, parts of a library for the last couple of years.
Okay. So I understand all that from a physical sense, like what is a library, but I think what people don't get is the internet aspect of what Internet Archive is about. I think it's common knowledge that most people interact with it through Wayback Machine, through archive links, but they don't understand, I guess, the resources, the intensity that goes into maintaining the code, and just how fragile the internet is. Um, so one question I had for you is, uh, I guess, is the main mission to preserve the internet in the state as it was, or is there any thought being put to how are we going to preserve this in the future, and what is that format going to look like? How are we going to change this?
So that's a pretty fundamental, huge question.
Hmm.
The archive of the internet is one thing we do because that's in the name, but it's mostly with a kind of more general sense trying to preserve and present the world's knowledge. Universal access to knowledge is one of our other slogans. So we sometimes lurk into areas people would probably be surprised that we have or that we deal in. For example, while we have millions of books online and we have many millions of record albums and recordings and podcasts, we also have large collections of physical books to represent those digitized books, as well as VHS tapes and 16 millimeter film and lots of software, tons of software. And we have some of it online, and we're in the process of putting as much of it online as we can afford and do at scale. And so we are really about, will humanity benefit from this knowledge? And it all got started because we were interested in the web as the concept of one of these new fields of knowledge, right? This idea that it was going to be this hyperlinked um, knowledge base that you could think about something, whatever it was, who played Marianne on Gilligan's Island, and within an hour you could be an expert not only on Gilligan's Island and Dawn Wells, but also the lives of all the other actors and the producer and the stage it was shot on and the world, and even start to leak into television production techniques of the 60s and 70s. And you know what I mean? Like just being able to build entire sets of research
Hmm.
and
Build the web
information.
of knowledge itself.
Yeah, and to do that, you just need a lot of primary source material and as much as you can get as fast as you can. And so the web seemed to be one easy way to do that. And when my boss, Brewster Kale, first set out on it, they were talking about, wow, we're going to get a terabyte of information.
Hmm.
And even by like 98 or 99, they're talking about we're up past 10 terabytes now. And at this point, right now, the archive is pulling in between 30 and 60 terabytes a day.
Wow.
So we are, far away from what we originally thought this was all going to be. The scale and numbers of what the archive does are just not obvious to people on the outside. I've tried to do demonstrative interfaces to how much is coming in. I mean, we are adding something like 3,000 plus books a day. We are adding, you know, uh, billions of URLs a week. to our web collection, when people are uploading, just users, that's not counting partners that we're organizing with, they're adding anywhere between 3 and 5,000 new items a day. And so there's just so much information coming in and being stored there. And I am finding that more and more people are using and depending on us as a reference point that they can, reasonably depend on. In most cases, we're aimed for the future, right?
Yeah.
Now, pulling it back to what you originally were talking about, the idea of and what happens in 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, it is quite obvious that we will do the best we can, but that over time, what we're going to probably see. I remember an archivist writing a article on the Internet Archive, and they said the future of the Internet Archive is it will probably be on somebody's hard drive under a directory / Internet Archive.
Mhm.
And that's probably true. Like, we will probably continue to get better and better at searching information such that it won't really matter how it's completely arranged, because you will be describing situations you want to know and things will actually coalesce into a reasonable way to get that information. Like, we had a whole bunch of printed stuff being uploaded, and a lot of people were annoyed because the metadata wasn't always great. The books were done well, and other partner organizations were doing well, but just folks, not so great. And then we added full text search for all OCR documents, which is anything that's uploaded that has text in it and becomes a PDF or becomes a EPUB and otherwise. And suddenly, all of that value was unlocked. You
Mhm.
could look for, Atari Canyon Bomber and find magazines, manuals, writings that had that in it. And the value immediately spiked. And so I suspect we're just trying to focus on holding everything together, making it as reproducible as possible, trying not to get locked into proprietary formats or forms, definitely not trying to control any kind of access to it when we can. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
never, if you go to an archive.org item in general, like vast general, you will always be able to download the original item that was uploaded. So if somebody uploads a 12 gigabyte 1 hour AVI of a VHS tape that doesn't exist anywhere else, you can get it. We'll have an MP4 for easily viewing it online, which is smaller and recompressed, but we'll always make sure that AVI is available to you as well, so both people can benefit. And we've tried to keep that wherever we can so that people will always have access to original material.
That opens up a lot of different paths for this conversation. So many questions. I guess the most obvious one is, do you think this is scalable? Especially when we see just the exponential increase of the internet around the world and how much data is coming in. One is, how do you determine what to save and what not to save? I'm sure that's an obvious one. And two is, how do you store it and how are you managing it? Especially when I'm sure the vast majority of these you never see anyone access pretty much ever, right? It's just that 1% that everyone goes for. So yeah, I guess it's a technological challenge and a problem of scale. I don't know.
Sure, it's both. I mean, we're certainly trying to do things that nobody else is doing. You have very few places where everything is absolutely reachable from every point of view. And doing random scans of the corpus for the purposes of scientific study. So they'll download tons and tons and tons of writing without really paying much attention to it, just because they're going to then run an AI search against it and try to turn it into some sort of teaching tool. We'll get people who get really obsessed with something like speed runs, and they'll download every speed run.
Hmm.
There are people who
And to be clear, you're building
for
Internet
education.
Archive for these purposes. Like when you're building the back
Yeah.
end out, okay, you're considering all this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in terms of people misusing us, or where we said, oh no, mostly that's spammers and people who try to use this as a back end for a paid service. We'll have a little chat with those folks. Just because we'll see that what they're doing is they're literally setting up like a for pay app that is
Yeah.
hitting us constantly. And we'll be like, dude, is this really really good. I mean, we don't always get angry. I mean, there's like one or two JPEG files that seem to have like 20 million reads, and it's like, okay, well, you're being used for something by somebody, but that's not killing us. But right now we have a lot of stuff where it's designed to be on two hard drives, and we watch them for being in any way different over time. We search them for what's called fixity, which is where you double, triple check that files add up to what you think they are. We don't trust anything, like we always are checking the hard drives and the connections and stuff. There's a lot of basically just trying to keep the doors open. Like we're being used a lot, especially in the pandemic, because people are staying home and then they're watching full films and everything else. We probably will hit some sort of crux um, somewhere in the future, maybe, where we have to start saying, like, we can't do this as much. Um, but in general, our policy has been to wait until running into those problems making themselves known instead of preemptively limiting people where possible. We generate a torrent for every item that's uploaded. We try to make it that the stuff is accessible 24/7, although we do a cost saving measure. So if it gets too hot, we will actually shut machines off. So we don't go for 5 nines. We try to like make it up most of the time and not have to pay millions of dollars to keep um, everything up 24/7 because we're constantly running spare hardware in the background to switch over to. And then we just dump that money into making more bandwidth available and replacing hard drives. So um, it's worked out for us so far. It's like any other open collection. We have to be careful of spammers and malware and phishing scams and
Hmm.
all of the other problems.
So,
We are dealing with those as they come.
so here's one
But
question in particular.
sure.
Just when who makes the call on what is worthy of being an internet archive? So, like, let's just say NFTs, for example. There's some artistic creative value to them. There's some cultural value to them. But would you see people trying to archive all NFTs as some sort of marketing aspect to it? Like, do they deserve to be in there in that state?
Okay. So this is an interesting one. I think
Yeah.
NFTs are crap, but here's the thing. So they're perfect, right? Let's discuss crap. Um, so there's really kind of like two kinds of crap, right? Like neutral crap, stuff that like defines itself as being great and it's not, or it's low quality writing, or it's obviously one blurry photograph by a person who doesn't know how to use a camera. And then there's crap that I think of as actively harmful,
Yeah.
like an attempt to, you know, threaten somebody, or which provides no information on it other than asking you to go to an external website to buy hair care products. So you're just literally not providing any information. There are people who are smart and know how to walk the crap line. Like, that's an old trick, right? You upload a perfectly great, well written book, but the book is very clear that it is part of this company or organization. Like, here's all of our hints on to become really rich with NFTs.
Hmm.
And part of the book makes it very clear that if you want more information, you should definitely check us out at nftsarnotcrap.com and we'll teach you more. And those walk the line, but they are providing a service. Like the
Yeah.
book is a book. So we are constantly having to deal with that edge situation. Um, there was one person who kept getting marked as spam, and I remember this. It would get marked as spam, and I was in the group, and I would go, "Oh, she's not spam. She's just self-deluded." Like, she comes off as spam because she's constantly talking about buying things, and it looks like it's spam, but it's just a very poorly made vlog. and she's talking about doing exercise, and she can't help but talk about products she uses, and she tells you she's really great, and she keeps telling you to look at her other vlog entries.
So,
But
so
that's it. There's no, you know what I mean? Like, that's a tough one,
yeah,
and humans will always have a problem.
does Internet Archive have some sort of stance on advertising in general? Because clearly there's a cultural, historical aspect to advertising, but also it's like it's direct advertising in the day. Is there a year
Yeah, I
period?
mean, no, we definitely don't have a year period. The biggest issue we have with spam is just the Internet Archive being used for non-value advertisements. That's the biggest thing. That's the definition we have of spam. And we will take them away, but we won't delete them. So we keep them historically. They just don't have that push of being used for ads. It's not so much, again, it's tough. It's a tough line to draw, and it is shifting, and there's no way around it. When you're open, you're constantly having to reevaluate what are your rules, right? I mean, if somebody puts up a piece of information that is factually wrong, but it's a put together piece of information, it'll probably stay up. Like, it will probably stick around, just in the same way that one would keep an old encyclopedia that completely screws up science or mentions elements that don't exist. Um, there's always going to be people who then use that wrong information as pointing out that this is why it's true or not, and we're going to be having that. That's the next 10 years, folks. Enjoy that.
I,
Um,
so in
but
general, do you consider is there a push to get old information updated, or do you just preserve it as is in the context and make people aware like this is no longer applicable?
in the way that I think the Internet Archive was designed or intended to be, it is a series of items that represent in their own way actual historical objects or creations, both online and off, that are of themselves.
Hmm.
Occasionally, people will use us for other methods. Like they'll try to have an item and they constantly are uploading new versions of the file, trying to update it for themselves because they're using us as their free web host. And that can persist for quite some time. We will take away, but we won't delete the previous versions. Um, but most people are taking items, right? A CD-ROM, a PDF, um, a WARC file, which is a web archive file, and then uploading it as a thing of itself. And if we have people who do a pretty good job, they'll produce a pretty cohesive collection that is worthy of becoming a collection.
Hmm.
But other people, yeah, they'll produce something where I'm like, why? Like the guy who uploaded like 400 different pictures of Nermal, the other main character of Garfield.
Was there a reason?
I haven't figured it out yet.
I guess the
I
reason's not needed either.
It's not. It's like, well, they are pictures and they are all of a bit. Hmm. Now, who knows what a replacement of me would think, right? You might have 5 years down the line, somebody might have a more restrictive view. But I come personally from an area of pretty wide stance because I ran textfiles.com, right? I
Yeah.
came from that area. I did work for rotten.com actually. So I mean I'm used to hosting all sorts of material that people are like, "Oh, the internet would be better if that was gone." And I'm like, "Yeah, but then you would have an internet that didn't reflect reality, so maybe we should keep it up." And I mean, that sort of debate. I mean, I love being in that debate, and there's a lot of strong opinions, but in general, keeping things up is better, I think, than preemptively taking them down.
So yeah, just to make this an even harder question, then let's talk about misinformation or like COVID misinformation in particular. We're giving it
Sure.
just archiving it gives it legitimacy. What do you think about this and how you deal with it in the future?
Oh boy. So my personal
Yeah, we'll
experience,
we'll
I
say
speak
this
for
is your
myself.
personal stance, of course, not
This is
Internet
my
Archive.
all of what I'm saying for the record of whoever's listening with their pen is the personal thoughts of one idiot. The archive may override me all the time and does. There have certainly been discussions I've had where I'm like, I think we should keep this. And then other people are like, nah, it's not going to stick around. And I'm like, okay. Other times people are like, it shouldn't stick around. And I go, no, it should stick around. And it sticks around, right? We discuss and debate when we have to. We had somebody who uploaded a whole bunch of stuff, and he uploaded them. He uploaded movie trailers, which, okay, but he made every movie trailer go to this really sketchy watch the free movie site that didn't
Oh yeah.
actually do it. So we took out the description that said go to the free movie site, because we were like, that part's spam. Everything else he's showing is not spam. Now it may turn out that he's copying some site of trailers. We may find that down the line, but okay, here's trailers. All right. But he was moving it into spam. Okay, so in terms of disinformation, I come from the position of like, save all of it,
Mhm.
because this is, like one of the things that people were saying in the beginning were, why, where are all these people coming from back when we had polio and back when we had um, the 1918 flu epidemic? Everyone stood as one and was able to eradicate it. But actually, if we go back and look, nope. Tons of anti vaxxers,
Yeah.
tons of protests, tons of resistance against it. There were people resisting against the London Blitz, turning off lights at night. There were people who would have loud, raucous parties on the roof with the lights on during the times that London is supposed to be dark so that the Nazis wouldn't bomb them, because they were like, who cares? Live life. Why live in fear?
Interesting.
And if we don't have the evidence of this approach to go, look what happened. Some people were extremely skeptical. If you want to be generous, and I'm feeling generous today, as you were generous letting me on, there may be grains of truth in there, right? It'll turn out that, if you look at like the fluoridated water argument, there is certainly evidence that they kind of oversold fluoridated water a tad, just in the rush to get water supplies fluoridated. They oversold how good it would do. Like, it would move the needle. It would definitely be overly good for us, but they kind of ran over any kind of questioning medical evidence.
Yeah.
And if we had destroyed all of those quote unquote disinformation folders, we wouldn't have any evidence of that discussion. We would be able to construct a narrative where everybody as a monolith agreed with this position, and that's why you should agree again now. So I definitely do not think we benefit by being the gatekeepers of the past and the present. I think, um, I got a personal love for kooks. I think that they're fascinating. There's a massive conspiracy paper whose name I'm now forgetting. I mentioned it in one of my podcasts, and it's like a 6-sheet PDF that's like packed to the brill, packed like a Dr. Bronner's soap label. It's amazing, and it just tries to turn you into like a whole new different person by perceiving everything as waves and everything else. It's fantastic. I think that stuff is interesting. It's creative. I think if a person is easily swayed by finding one document, I think that they were going to be swayed by anything. I mean, they were seeking an answer that they had already concocted. I have this UFO document. Now, I got this UFO document when I was 19. I got it from MUFON, which was this MUGEN, which is I could be getting this wrong. It's either MUFON or MUGEN. It's this UFO conspiracy bulletin board, and I downloaded all their stuff, and I put it in the conspiracy and UFO sections of textfiles.com. And one of them was this amazing document. It went on for like 60 pages, and it was from a guy, and it was a pretty complicated conspiracy theory. It indicated that extraterrestrials who farmed us for food had also made connections at the highest forms of government
course.
to control us. It was really interesting. It would be like you and I reached some sort of diplomatic arrangement with cattle, and it had this huge document. It was from a guy, okay, and it was from some guy who claimed that he had like been in the army and he'd gotten to glance at all this. And I was like, this is weird when I'm 17 years old. This is amazing. This is just, I've never seen this before. This is nuts. Can't be true. Whatever. So I had it up there for many years, and it's still up there. And there was an interview with this guy on Coast to Coast, like 15 years later. And on Coast to Coast, he's talking about it. And to cite his information, he links people to textfiles.com. Like, here's this long running site that's providing you my truth. This is how you get to it. And I was like, you're real? You're an actual person? You aren't like 5 college students going crazy and getting high? You're a real person, and you're using me, citing me as a source, as a long range source of the writing. So stuff comes back at you. And I don't think I'm still in the position that I don't think you really protect people or shift gullible people away by hiding away material. I think if somebody wants a book that tells them that they're made of gold and they can shave their fingers off to make money on the market, they're going to look for that kind of book no matter what. And if you get rid of it, that's just evidence to them that it's even more correct. And then you lose the benefit of understanding where this trope, this belief comes from. So that's not everybody's position. I totally get it. That's more textfiles.com than archive.org out of me. And it's not an easy question. It is inordinately difficult. But I have never felt worse than being an arbiter of information.
Yeah,
So I
that's
try
hard.
not to be.
I imagine there's some argument to having it in a sanitized environment like archive.org. Like if you take Mein Kampf and read it there, you're getting it in the library setting. Maybe that changes the context a bit for how people interpret it.
I think it's rough. It's hard to tell. I think that you definitely have. I'll tell you, there's a guy who had been harassing me for years. People who know the talk. Um, the time I was sued for $2 billion.
Yeah.
The person who was suing me, Paul Mitchell, used to send these letters to the Supreme Court justices, and they would return them because bonkers. Except for Scalia. Scalia's people just would I guess, make a crank room so they could figure out if that was the person, like that name would come up again. So once he figured out that Scalia wouldn't return the documents he was sending, he would write at the bottom of every document, filed with the US Supreme Court. Every time, right? So there is that argument, like that strange kind of people will find legitimacy in that. And I think when you're running various forms of grift and persuasion can live very close on the spectrum. So
Yeah.
when you're seeking to build up some sort of authority, you can try to do things like that, like say, look, I'm published, here's my book that's published, and people who know what they're doing will say, oh, that's from, I'm making a name up here, that's from Clover Press. Clover Press is vanity. They'll print anything for $250. But other people will go, huh, wow, he's published. So we've been seeing that for over a couple centuries now. People utilizing, authority. And authority is constantly shifting because of it. It's gotten pretty hardcore now, but there's a talk I gave about Wikipedia back in 2004 that I said that Wikipedia was the dress rehearsal for a coming Black Mirror landscape. I actually called it a dark mirror in 2004. That I called Wikipedia a dark mirror that holds up to humanity its worst aspects. and that we were going to see plays and attempts to control information on Wikipedia that would become legion later. And I was right. And so here we are now, where literally people who are just getting used to the fact that swipe up means next, and holding something down for a while is a different control than just pressing the button. Suddenly they're deep into, you know, preschool forms of OPSEC, false flag, um, conspiracy approaches, and trying to understand, reigns of control. And, they're not ready for that. That's like, that's way too much for them. So they're kind of stumbling along, and they pull over with a pretty heinous nugget of information and bring it up with their kids, and their kids are like, "What?" And I don't think access or lack of access to information is the problem there. I think that's just education that they
Yeah.
got. I was one of the last school classes to get home economics. Like, I learned how to do cooking and, running a home and what's involved in budgeting. And that's not there in many school systems now, which means I have information they don't. But then again, I was also under the geometry, algebra, trigonometry levels, and that changed. So it's all different. Um, and I think that, like, we're going to just have this unfortunate wave where people are going to be really affected by this stuff deeply, and then we will build up an immunity to it, ironically.
So I guess I agree with you on most points. The only time it becomes a limitation then is when you can't process all the incoming information. You have to start filtering the signal from the noise. So do you foresee this in the future where Internet Archive will have to start prioritizing certain types of information over others? I mean, you already do. I'm sure there's limited resources, but
I mean, so we're definitely already getting to a point where we have to contact certain groups who will upload something, but it's usually in terms of resources. Like, there's a group uploading satellite readings. It's like satellite dish signal readings, and they were uploading one, I don't know what to call it, one reading per item, and it was resulting in 3 million items, which put a big thing on the system. And we negotiated with them. We talked about it. We said, hey, here's another way to do it. I'll write the thing to help you reconsolidate it, and you can do it going forward. Now it's like, I think the number is, yeah, it's 10,000 readings per item. So instead of 3 million items, it's like 1,700 items. Okay, everybody's happy. Like, we talked with them, we negotiated with them, we understand it. So it happens all the time. We are constantly having to notice that somebody is really putting a push on the system, and we just go, hey, what's going on here? Or we'll discover on our own that, wow, we put in a PNG and the PNG is 2 megs and it should have been, 15K. What were we thinking? I did that once, crashed the archive. Was giving every person 150 megabytes of PNG files when they only needed 1.5 megs. So made that change, fixed it up. In the same way, we will see where people, there are over 150 radio stations that I have found so far for which the Internet Archive is the back end for their entire archives. Like, they upload it to us and then they provide it on their page, and we are their back end.
yeah, and that makes the most sense for someone who's worried about the permanence of the internet. Like, what else are they to do, really?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think it's fantastic. My boss thinks it's fantastic. It is great when we are part of the fabric in that way. We benefit because we have copies of it. They benefit because they're not paying for hosting in the same way. Um, the the argument only comes later when, for instance, people will upload redundant material. We certainly have to deal with a lot of people who are like, I'm going to upload this. And I'm like, we already have a copy, folks. Like if something gets really hot out there, like, oh, we rescued this and here's a 75 meg zip file. And then we'll get 25 people uploading that 75 meg zip file because they want to be heroes. And I get it, but we already got it. And we've discussed in some way some minor deduplication engineering, but that would be on our side. Like we would notice what's going on and link it over and
Yeah, you would have to figure
make
that out.
decisions. Yeah, and so like, we'll probably deal with that. You know, at the moment we're able to stay out ahead. When things get more crunched, I am definitely one of the people who has been asking those questions, writing internal white papers to say, what do we do if this is no longer valid? What do we do if we run into this cost crunch? What do we do about this? So, I'm a real who moved my cheese kind of guy. I definitely think that if you don't plan for contingencies, all you're doing is reacting to them. So I'd much rather have a situation where I said, oh, here's something we could do here. And they go, let's try that. Um, we have ways we could save more disk space, but we would have to then write scripts that are doing an awful lot of work on the back end. And now we're using more processing power and we're adding another layer. So is that
So,
a good idea?
so, so talking about future-proofing that system, then where are you going to fall behind? Is it actually on storage space or processing power?
processing power is holding pretty fast. We just figured out how to do OCR through GPUs. It turns out they're good for something else besides Bitcoin mining. And we also have been able to keep upgrading our disks. So currently our standard is 16 terabyte disks. When I started out there in 2011, it was 2 terabyte disks. So 8 times in 11 years, we've been able to hold that out. We're probably going to get hit on the well, if I had to guess what's gonna screw us over, it's probably going to be
We could think of it in two terms here. We could think about it in terms of your operational costs, and then we could think of like the physics limitations, I guess, in like 100, 200
sure.
years based on technology. But like, yeah, in the immediacy, what is your constraint?
I'm vaguely concerned about 8K video.
Okay.
I think if we get too much 8K video right now, that will put too much of a lean on our system. I am a little worried that people feel the need to use us to mirror YouTube. They will mirror YouTube videos on us. So we have been doing a lot of reach out to stop people from doing that. It's one thing to go, well, these 10 videos were lost because the owner died and the channel went down and there's no record of it. And then it's like, great, we should definitely mirror that. And we definitely try to mirror the top, I don't know, 1,000 videos that have views because they're culturally significant by the amount of people. And I know we mirror pretty much any YouTube video that gets tweeted, although we don't necessarily make them accessible. We're just copying them in the background because they're part of the human conversation. But then we'll get somebody who goes to somebody who has 300 videos and they'll run a script and they'll mirror all 300 videos onto us. Videos we might already have, even, by the way. And the problem is twofold. First of all, a lot of YouTube videos are products. Like the people who have them up are expecting ad revenue and Discord signups and
Yeah.
Patreon
It's a
memberships.
direct
And
gateway, views, everything.
yeah, and that's important to them. And mirroring it takes that away from them and agitates them against a party they shouldn't have to be agitated with. So that's a that's a very tough pill. Like right now a lot of things are being mirrored. Like Twitch will obviously do these rounds of wiping out things arbitrarily and it's nice to have them on the archive, but we also don't want people to speculatively upload
Yeah.
terabytes of video simply because it's cool, man, because that will run us out. Like, um, that's a problem because it's getting easier and easier to mirror to the archive because people are writing scripts to do so, and that's fine. But like I said, they will mirror a YouTube video, and the YouTube video will either already be mirrored and not accessible, or we don't want to eat into somebody's, episode 150, which came out 2 days ago, and somebody's being a hero. And so we have to take them aside and just say, hey, you can't do this, man. Thanks. Happy to be thought of. We got it, though. Conversely, I contacted Red Bull Academy when they lost their funding and said, can we mirror all your videos? And they were like, hell yeah. Oh yeah. So like the full Red Bull Academy videos are on the Internet Archive. They're also on YouTube, but we have them because we both agreed this is historically important. And if that channel gets wiped clean by Red Bull or whoever buys the Red Bull Academy material, we want it to survive. So like a lot of reaching out to people, a lot of communication, and I think at this moment we're holding up that scale. Um, that could break us, I guess. Although there's such homogeny now. It's one thing when it used to be there were 1,000 websites, but let's be clear, there's like 12. And really when it's 12, you learn procedures to deal with it. You learn ways to detect it. You learn ways to handle the material coming in. I would not call it out of bounds to see a world where somebody will try to upload the video and our system will reject it, saying we already got it. Thanks. So that's not out of the bounds. That may help. If we used to have this problem, I loved this problem. Every once in a while, somebody would upload a GIF, animated GIF. I pronounce it GIF, and it would be a 215 meg GIF. And I was like, hey, why is it a 215 meg GIF? And then it would become so popular, it would cause that server to slow down. And it was an anime episode because somebody was uploading an MP4, renaming it as a .gif, giving it a bunch of nonsense characters, and then uploading it. So we added a thing going, if you're a GIF, if you call yourself a GIF, but you're not a GIF, no.
There's a size limit on them.
Yeah, and it had a lot of knock-on effects that to me were very positive. People stopped really uploading pure garbage to us that was only meaningful to one community. So I was very pleased about that. That's a case where we just made a subtle technical change and it saved us countless hours. I mean, countless hours.
I imagine.
Moderation. And that's just because some people were abusing the system and thinking they could get past us. And honestly, if your relationship to a host is adversarial, I question whether you are truly a patron or a user of that system. So to me, the argument is this is not censorship. This is not, being moderators. This person is just literally hacking the system. He's trying to fool our system into thinking he's uploading an image and he's giving it nonsense names and then giving the information to others to mule it away. And they're crashing the system temporarily because they're all pulling it down at once because there's no regulation because they're all pulling it at once. And then they disappear. And it was just until the next time they do it, which is usually about an hour and a half later. So that's a case where, we just got to keep track of them. And I must stress, by the way, everyone's got this problem. They're all to these varying degrees, right? And we do it with a relatively small group of people. Some places they have literal buildings full of hundreds of people dealing with this. And they have to undergo psychiatric evaluation. They have to go in shifts to deal with it. So that moderation is a difficult task and always will be. And whenever you have anyone who tries to, okay, here's a spoiler for you. When the next service comes along and says, we're censorship free, we have no moderation, we are totally into free speech, give them about a year. About a year. They can get away with about a year.
And then they'll get stress tested by
And that's
actual
it.
information. Yeah.
And then it's over. It might even be sooner. And they will be moderating. They'll have a name for it that's not moderating. But, you know, that's just functional. I mean, anybody who thinks that you can algorithmically solve it is insane. It's not true. That's a fact. If you have an open area, you got to deal. And every organization, from a drugstore to video rental shop to a library to a government building, all has various levels of administration and dealing with moderation for what comes in through the door. And anybody who thinks otherwise is just, they're not aware of reality.
So talking about this problem, and then previously, well, I guess the main problem is detecting duplicates and some level of automated moderation. Has Internet Archive considered machine learning or any applications to help figure this out? Or is this like, what do you think of this problem? Is it a solvable problem, or is it a very hard problem to detect duplicates and do it efficiently?
I mean, I think over time, I mean, I've built a moderation system that is very helpful by hand in Bash. Um, I think that if somebody was to come and to donate a system, we'd be interested, but we would not be interested in spending millions of our relatively small budget towards chasing a dream. You know, Facebook could probably blow 20 million on an experimental AI learning system, run it on the side using 14 servers, and see what it starts coughing up. And having a portion of people assigned with an extra window on their desk that's watching things and gives them warnings. Like they could afford to do that. I think we run a little close to the bone to do that, to spend a lot of money on experimental tech in the hope that it will make life better. Occasionally we get people who are willing to do virus scans for us or provide us with various other technologies, and you know, we'll talk to them. But we're just not in the speculative business. Like we're
Hmm.
not going to be buying, you know, they currently sell, oh, what are they? It's not 1 petabyte. I think it's a half, it's 500 terabyte discs. They're very expensive. They're like 34 grand. Um, but we're not going to buy those. We'd rather spend that 34 grand on, you know, 16 terabyte discs at a certain price range and pay to keep the lights on for a certain number of weeks and, you know, pay the salaries of a few people, as opposed to, wow, it all fits on one. Now, if somebody, again, said to us, hey, as an experiment, can we give you 10 of these?
Yeah.
We'd go, sure. Yeah, we'll try it out. We'll talk about it. That's fascinating. I just, you know, our budget, I mean, people hear our costs. It costs about 20 million a year to run the Internet Archive. And some people go, "Oh, that's fantastically huge." And other people go, "That's impossible. You're cheating. You're doing something. You couldn't possibly do that." I mean, we're one of the top 200 websites and we run at less than 20 million a year. And that's everything. That's everything from my salary to keeping the lights on to all the hard drives and bandwidth and everything else. So for some companies, you know, like that's 5 Facebook parties. So it is completely at a scale that does not allow us to go incredibly deep into experiments. That said, there's somebody out there. We love talking to people. So if there's people who are like, hey man, I wrote this cool thing. Can I run it against your corpus? We can go, well, here's a way we could possibly do that. Let's try it out. That's pretty neat. And we can grow together. Um, so who knows? Who knows? I could be surprised by our new partner this June, you know? There's a new window, Jason. It does something amazing. Great. I mean, I've done experiments on the corpus. People have written academic work with us. We have been partners in news studies and reports and government studies, you know, utilizing video and audio and web grabs on the archive. And that's been part of the conversation. Um, We just introduced Scholar, Internet Archive Scholar, which is a search um, many uh, millions of scholarly texts that were saved at the Wayback Machine that are gone, that you can't get links to anymore. And people are using it and they're getting access to things. And so, in theory, it's better. So, that was an experiment that grew into a project that grew into a feature.
But
So,
I guess because your budget is so strapped, you're just mainly focusing those features on accessibility or something directly benefiting your users. You're not going to risk that on anything that's going to sort of advance the futures of archiving technology, we'll say.
we certainly will not spend a dollar in a direction that is speculative over a dollar that keeps us running. We're
Makes a
not
lot of
really into
sense.
moonshots per se. Now, we love partnering. I mean, if I get somebody who will be like, "Can I do a grant? You guys should apply for a grant." I had that happen recently. Somebody showed me a possible grant we could apply for, and I said, "We're probably not going to apply for this grant, but if somebody was to apply for a grant, we would partner with them
Mm,
and
yeah,
give them the cachet." Because believe it or not, I mean, somebody will say like, "Oh, a $25,000 grant." And I'm like, well, you're also talking about, with many grants, taking one of our people out of circulation for weeks out of the year. And that's a person who can only do certain things at the archive. But now they're sitting over there explaining to you, like our statistics and writing bios and setting up the calculations. So we'd rather somebody else worked with it and then said, and it'll be hosted at the archive. It'll be open and accessible, and here's where it'll be. And every once in a while, someone will come to me with like, "Oh, I've got all this data, and everyone told me I should come to you." And I'll be like, "How big is it?" And they'll be like, "It's huge." And I'll be like, "Yeah, how big? How big?" And they're like, "It's 15 gigabytes, man." And I'll be like, "I uploaded 15 gigabytes by mistake
that's
yesterday.
cute. Yeah.
Go ahead, put it right up there, and it'll be whatever.tar.gz, and a bunch of people will be like, "Oh my God, it's here." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's you know, there are." There are some amazing things on the archive that I will discover every once in a while. Like, I found a guy was uploading almost 2,000 unique items related to transportation, and it was like vintage airline timetables and brochures for luggage space in buses and postcards of various planes of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I gave him a collection. I'm just like, this is great. Thanks. Transportation.
It's official.
Um, I don't even know. Every day I walk in, I was talking to a friend today about this, about how I sometimes feel bad because I play Battle Royale on Xbox, and I will see these games that are very complicated that have these beautiful followings from people. And it'll be a role playing game or a game involving, um, exploration or solving puzzles. And I'll start to play them, and I'm like, I don't have time for this, because the archive truly satisfies that feeling of exploration and finding things and making them available, except it's reality. It's things that have been made or are scanned in and digitized. And if I put the effort in, I can write scripts that kind of detect uploads along a certain range, like here's CD-ROMs, here's magazines, here's catalogs and things. And then I just, as a person, kind of go, yep, that's a catalog. Yep, that's a catalog. And in doing so, I make the world a better place while also seeing just breathtaking art and writing. And it has completely burned out that game playing muscle.
Yeah.
So I can only play games that last for about 10 or 15 minutes before there's another round, because I don't have time.
Are you mainly
And
going for those sorts of games then? That's actually, I was going to ask you if you liked like very deep, methodical, historic based games. Maybe you go there for a different sort of entertainment though.
I don't. I like battle royale games. That is my number one favorite thing. Just
They're fun.
I love landing in an island full of people around the world and thinking that in about 15 minutes I'll be standing on a pile of all of their bodies going, "Well, that was a shame for all you." And I love that the game is emergent. Like I can be in some moods, I can be suicidal and aggressive, and in other ones, I can be, you know, careful, cautious, ninja-like. I can be different kinds of characters. I can sneak around, never fire at anybody till the end, or I can just hop into a car and make everyone's life terrible. Like I love that there's such a variation of an open world game while still focusing on a ever aggressively shrinking circle until you have to confront them.
Yeah, it has.
I like that genre. I'll probably be happy with that genre for a long time.
It is a
That
good
is
formula. And I was
yeah.
also gonna say, do you feel like sense of progression? That's a big thing too, like starting from nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea that everyone's landing. I mean, it's very similar to the movie, and it's similar to the other ones of like you land, and a few people just get clocked right off the bat. Right? They land. They're like, I wish. Hey, where am I going to get a gun? And they die. That is their game. Their game was 6 seconds, and you're landing, and you look down, and you're seeing that play out. Right? And most games have a secret hand that is trying to constantly force you towards the story or the plot. But in PUBG and Warzone and a bunch of others, you can be up on a mountain with a view, up on a hill, and in the distance, you see a vehicle going at full speed, and you're like, I wonder what that's going to do. And you can see it smash into a house,
Yeah.
and up in the corner, you see the numbers go down, and you're like, that worked out well for somebody. And you'll see like another person suddenly, like on another hill, and they don't see you, and you see them, and you're going through your stuff going, can I get this guy? Or are we just going to be hill buddies? And you just sit there.
That's
and
it.
and I love that. I love it. Like I said, emergent. I love that it shifts for that. And that's been my jam for a few years now.
Interesting.
It's
It's almost like a roguelike experience too. Like before you found this genre, what other genres were you into?
played a lot of Halo doubles, very specifically doubles, where it's two versus two, because if somebody saw you, they were chasing you for a reason. And you could actually like do strategy. And I have partners I play with where like we got really good at the strategy of a two-person versus two-person game. I played that a lot.
All shooting
I
games
played
though?
Yeah, I mean, I played Grand Theft Auto 5. I liked the illusion of an open world, although the illusion fails for me pretty quickly. Um, I enjoyed most Ubisoft open world games until you realize it's all the same game reskinned. Like it almost feels like there's a Ubisoft open world maker and different teams are using it. Like it really feels that way to me.
This point, yeah.
It's been a long, I mean, I'm 50 years old, so I mean, the time for me of arcades and wow, what's this game? And it turns out to be Centipede. That's like 40 years ago. Um, there was a period of time from like 1979 to about 83, 84, where like almost what felt like every other week there'd be a brand new game with a brand new mechanic you had never seen before, right? Like one week you're flying in three-quarter perspective into a space using a joystick, and then the next 2 weeks you're going to play as a bear collecting gems while using a trackball. You're a paper boy. You're fighting weird space centipedes. You're fighting, like that was very exciting. Once it all settled down, it was much less interesting to me when it was like, there's somebody on the left and there's somebody on the right, and they have a disagreement.
Fighting
And
games. That's what I do
whoever
mainly.
whoever punches the other person to death more wins.
Oh, I could defend
And
fighting games another day. That's a funny interpretation though. I like it.
well, again,
Not a
the
fan.
thing about fighting games, right, is that they're gladiatorial um, competition, which means that if it's programmed right, lots of flexibility for subtlety for a certain kind of person who wishes to learn that subtlety.
Yeah, it takes a certain person, that's for sure.
And over time, to me, I didn't find myself willing to do that extra journey, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just like
it takes a lot of
it.
effort.
Yeah, it's like any professional sport, right? Like you got to get up there and you got to make it that at no time can you ever, like if you're playing tennis, let's say, you got to know that when you swing and you hit that ball, you're going to hit it a certain way, and you got to be drilled in to where that's not part of your, if you're, you can play tennis, but at some point you got to play tennis such that you know when you hit that ball which corner it's going to, and you made that choice because you evaluated the other person.
Yeah, you've
and
optimized it that far.
and that's a level that I wasn't willing to go to with fighting games or most competition games like that. Like I said, um with a game like uh Battle Royale, you can become different types of players and you can shift around. And I got tired of constantly being under threat. So that's a choice. At no point when I give my opinions about something I like am I denigrating somebody's love of something I
Of
don't.
course, yeah, I wouldn't take it that
I'm
way.
I've gotten way too many things going on, and I'm overseeing a lot of stuff at the archive where I'm like, this does not interest me.
Yeah,
I
no,
do
most
not
people
wish
don't
to
have time
learn
for
this.
this.
But somebody matters. Somebody cares about this book. Somebody cares about this writing. You will see people writing long reviews about how much this thing affected them, and they can't believe they can just get to it anytime, and they're in love with it, and they're so happy. And so I absolutely, you know, I love that. What I want to go into, people will say to me like, "Oh, what are you into? Maybe I'm into that too." And I'm like,
Probably
you put
not.
me on that horse. Well, maybe you will. I mean, I can certainly give people stuff that I think has a general bent, but then like I'll super be into like something really weird and obscure because it fascinates me somebody did that. Like the variant user interfaces made by home computer utilities in the 80s fascinates me because you have single developers who are going to make a disk copy program or a communications program, and the sky's the limit. There are no libraries. They're writing their own stuff from scratch. How good are they at making a disk sector map to represent the copying? How are they going to show this status line? And some of them do these amazing bits of art. And I could like make a really good description about that. But I don't expect anybody else to be like, "Oh, this is how you spend a Tuesday night."
Oh yeah, UI is a special appreciation, I think, but at least it's
Yeah,
visual.
exactly.
People get it. I think now it's a bit more homogenized, just due to, I guess, the nature of mobile and generalizing to multiple platforms.
Well, yeah, libraries and middleware and kits. I mean, I totally get it. I love the idea that somebody wants to write. I love the idea that a person gets an idea in their head and they're like, what if I made a game in which every time the main character cried, they become more powerful and you have to find ways to make them feel bad? And that person does not immediately have to launch into learning low level graphics resolution or dealing with screen brightness or communication levels or control mechanisms. They just plunk all of it in. It's going to have a joystick. It's going to have the two following buttons. It's going to have platforms. I'll draw the platforms later. Let's get going. That's great. Like, I think it's fantastic that a person can concentrate on their story. And maybe at the end they say, you know what, this didn't work. But they'll find that out very quickly. Or they'll say, this is really something special. And they can iterate it into something really powerful. Um, I'm a huge fan of that. I love dev kits and pre-made stuff. The price we pay is that UIs tend to homogenize, approaches tend to homogenize. A person tends to go with the first default setting because they're trying to get on to the next level of it. They just want to try their own game. I get it. Um, it's a good price to pay. Um, and we get as a result, we get some of the greatest ideas in games now. Fantastic ones. We
Yeah,
get
there's still a
flipped.
lot of experimentation out there.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess, yeah, a good note to, I guess, wind down on is like what sorts of, I don't know if you want to call them gaming experiences or just technological experiences. What are you looking forward to seeing evolve in the future? Are you an AR, VR guy, or are you kind of past that?
I have a so I do have an Oculus. So I do enjoy myself a little Beat Saber. I guess I didn't mention that. I like sitting in the fake office, the Cyber City office, with my three um, browser windows open to like a Twitch stream, my Twitter stream, and something else, and I just sit back and enjoy that, acting like I'm in a cool cyber world. Um, so um, thematically, there are these new cloud gaming services, none of which I have much faith in surviving too
Like
long.
Stadia, we'll say.
Yeah, I own Stadia Countdown, which just shows you when it's going to statistically die. Um, but one of the things that Stadia and other cloud services were pushing was, of course, you always have the best system, right? Because you're always going to have this system somewhere that greatly outstrips yours, that will always be updated, that will be the fastest it can be, and so on. And they will say, oh, you can't really play this on anything else but Stadia. You can't really play this unless it's on a cloud service. And I feel like there is an entire family of potential gaming aspects that they absolutely don't take advantage of. And I get it. Like, I totally get it for the moment.
So just to like, I guess is one of what an example would be like having a server running with 500 people in it, just like more crazy scales of MMOs and social experiments. You're saying?
On one level, okay, so some of those include, yeah, I want 1,000 player battle royale game that
Yeah.
lasts a week. Like
It's like Rust.
your character goes into a stasis for when you're sleeping, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe you've just got to bed down in a way that you're camouflaged enough that nobody happens
Oh
on you
man,
by.
have you heard of Rust? I'm playing it right now. You have to build a base and survive at night. It's like a battle royale on a week scale, yeah.
Oh, I'll have to take a look at that.
Oh, I'll invite you to my team. We'll play it sometime.
And
It's an
then
interesting
I
experience.
also believe in persistent worlds that get wore down,
Uh-huh.
right? Um, the ability to have the calculations being done to a much greater scale because you've got a supercomputer that's pushing against
I
all of
see.
these
Better physics
lines.
rendering. Yeah, that opens up
Everything.
everything.
And and all of that potential is there. But right now, they're just happy enough that when you boot up, you get Grand Theft Auto 5. And there it is. And it's at a very high resolution. And that is it. And I'm just like, this could be. You could have it that you boot up and you blink twice because you're not sure if you're looking at a movie. And nobody's focused on that level yet. Microsoft will
Do
probably
do
be
you
there
think
first.
that's a future or is that a future you're looking forward to, I guess? That level of realism.
Yeah, I mean, I want something where, I mean, I love it when it's stylized, for sure. There's some game coming up where you're like an explorer that I saw that was very stylized, that felt like the next generation past Firewatch. And I love that. But I also think that you can have some very exciting items that break past the feeling that you either have the nice box in your house or the nice box that's in another city to I am connected to a thing that is beyond belief and reckoning. And I think we saw a hint of it with World of Warcraft
Mhm.
and with EverQuest and so on, but I think it could be so much more. Yeah. I mean, imagine playing a battle royale where you look out into the distance, like I said you know, um, about seeing like a car, you know, explosion playing out, except it's an explosion like 15 miles away that took out like 10 people because somebody decided to wire themselves up with basically a nuclear bomb, and you feel it 15 away, and now you can't go in that portion of the island, and you have to make decisions based on that. Like that level of
Just such sheer
strategy and
complexity, yeah.
like I think that would be very exciting. I think that if you feel like your box is the same as the box that's remote, that's one thing. But I would be very excited by a world where the box in another world uh, felt like something you could never see in your own home. It's just that's just kind of where I come from. A long time ago, I visualized a world for like Super Mario where I was like, imagine like you could be on this island and out in the distance you saw other islands being built, and you would move to those islands, and it would be a sense of adventure or whatever. But anything like that, I don't question we already put too much effort into games. Like when you shoot a Call of Duty game and you can hear with perfect physics the bullet come out of the chamber and bounce across a rock and a piece of metal, I'm like, that's too much. We didn't need that. That's a lot. But here we are. It seems to be really important to a lot of people, so why even flinch at some of the potential out there?
That's pretty deep. I'm thinking of all the just I'm thinking of Rust in particular. If we could take this and just like triple the scale of it and do some of the things you're saying. But yeah, I guess as processing power goes up, just like sheer number of ideas that are possible at these scales necessarily goes up too. New
Yeah,
experiences. So okay,
I'm
so
very excited by it. I mean, when I worked at a game company for like a year or two, one of the games I came up with two games, and one of them primarily used light, and the other one primarily used water. And they would have been kind of interesting, but in 1996, they would have been very difficult to develop. Now I think they would be some kids' development on a weekend, which makes me sad. But I wanted a game where you would light up places by using mirrors more and more aggressively. So you were trying to spread light everywhere using machines. And the other one was building up a false narrative, an alternate history, where instead of silicon, we used water. So we ended up using like water flow to make our computers work. And you are trying to repair computers using water. So you're aiming water in every direction to make computers work better. Interesting. I think it would have,
I could
gone
interpret
through
that in
some
so many
revisions.
ways. Yeah, it could be like a fun couch co-op thing. It could be a very serious hard game.
Yeah, it's basically Jason reinvented Incredible Machine, I think, is basically what
Okay.
he did. And that's fine. I mean, it's a genre.
Oh yeah, people would
But
play it. I could think that.
yeah, that's exactly, you know, I like games. They make our dreams real, and I love playing them for that reason.
I think it's good to have someone who loves games at Internet Archive too. I remember this experience I had a month ago of my uncle, who he just kept saying like there was this old game I played, and this guy kept going a taxi over and over again, and we ended up going to Internet Archive and being able to find it. I forget what it was called. I think it was like Space Taxi or something.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we didn't even cover that. I know we've already hit the levels, the limits of uh, a podcast like this. But yeah, the emulation at Internet Archive was designed because when I first joined up, Brewster gave what he liked to call a tough project to me, and he said, we have movies and music and websites, and you click on a button and you're listening to the music, you're watching the movie, you're reading the book. Why can't we do that with software? And I was like, well, we could. And he proposed one model of how to do it that I felt would work very well, but wouldn't scale. And then there was another way that was impossible, but I thought would scale. And we went with the second one, and that became what we call the emularity, which is to run a series of JavaScript, later WebAssembly browsers um, that
That's the
play
current
games,
implementation, right?
and it works. Yeah, you click
Yeah.
on it, boom, you're looking at it, right? And you're like, huh, here's this old DOS program. You press a button, and within a few seconds, you're playing it. And I think that's the jump, because if you added all of those steps of downloading it, loading into your browser, taking a look at it, a lot of games wouldn't even be looked at. But with doing this, you're able to link to it and say, "Go over here, click this. Look, this is the game I loved." And as a result, some of these games get hundreds of thousands or millions of plays from people because they say, "Oh, it's that game." And it has been a really good experiment for all sorts of software and console games and everything else, because you go to it and you're like, I would have never tried this game unless I could try it instantly in this library setting. And people complain. They're like, it's slow on my machine because it uses their CPU, it doesn't use our CPU. And it's like, yep, slow. It's emulating an operating system running a program in your browser, in your operating system, on your machine you bought 8 years ago. So yeah, but I use it like you might look at the first, you know, 20 random frames of a movie to figure out like what kind of movie is this, just to get an idea. And then when you think it's really good, yeah, download it, emulate it, go
Yeah.
crazy. So that's been a really good thing over the it's almost 10 years now to play that part. And so a lot of old games that I would have never played, I've played now. I mean, they're not all interesting to me, and they shouldn't be. But every once in a while, someone will say, this obscure prototype. And I'll be like, let's try it. And here you go. And oh my goodness, this is amazing. So it becomes part of the conversation again. And it's one of my proudest pieces of work at the archive. And it's been a real pleasure to watch it, be a part of people's research and history and everything else. So, and I have to say, both by law and by my own personal ethics, that I'm barely a mover in this. There were 12, 15 people over the years who have helped make this work, both people working with emulators and people who helped it compile and people who helped transfer it in a way that would work in browsers. And they did the real work. I was just the one who wouldn't shut up about it and said, where are we? Where are we? And then it would go a little further and go a little further. So they're the real, the real MVPs.
All right. Well, you're a good advocate for gaming. We'll say that. Yeah, this has been fascinating. I definitely want to talk to you again. I get into more technical stuff about archiving. I don't know. Is there anything you want to plug right now? Any causes you want to talk about? I'd love to shout it out to the viewers.
Internet Archive's donation page is archive.org/donate. I am Text Files on Twitter. That is the place you can watch me go off all the time and talk about cool things happening. Other than that, no. Have a great time with life. Enjoy the Internet Archive. That's what it's there for.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Jason. I'm going to message you after this too. I have some follow-up questions, but hopefully we can do this again in a few months, and hopefully the world's looking a bit better then too. But
I would hope so.
yeah,
I would hope so.
It can't go much more downhill, right?
That's my general approach to life anyway. That's it kind of works out. I'm like, it's only up from here.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Anyway, I hope you and the family stay safe. Thank you again. Have a good night.
No problem.
All right, good night, everyone. Thanks for watching. Support Internet Archive, support Jason Scott. I'm gonna make a donation right after this. You guys should too. Take care.